I would rather take my time getting to the biggest level and developing a trust with these guys because I get to introduce to you the person under the uniform as opposed to what he does in the box score.
How do you shut it off when you're dating?
Probably 9 out of 10 times the question I get from a guy. Who's the rudest guy that you've ever interviewed? That's their first question is if you want to compliment me on the certain things of who I am as a person, you want to join this lifestyle with me, buckle up. I know I'm female, but I also know I can use that to my benefit. And that has a lot to do with the questions I ask.
How do you find time in your life to do all this stuff here?
I think I'm still trying to find the balance. I don't think you truly do. And I feel like we can have everything we want in life. I just sometimes don't think it's all at the same time.
Welcome back to Real Talks on the Rocks. Today, my guest is Jessica Kleinschmidt. Jessica is the pre- and post-game host for the Oakland A's baseball team. She talks a lot about what it is to be in sports media, what it is like to specifically be a woman in sports media. We also talked about dating today in the Bay Area, in the industry as a whole. This is a great episode if you ever had questions about what it's like to be behind the scenes of a media-based person regarding sports specifically, or if you're just curious what it takes to make it in any kind of industry and the work that you have to put into it, what the expectation should be, and how you find that balance in your own life, what it means to have a 60-hour-a-week career, trying to find a date, trying to decide if you want to buy a house, all these other things that we talk about. Mental health was also a big topic that was discussed because given being on TV, there's a lot of things you have to be prepared for, you have to deal with, and overall was a great conversation. So enough of me talking. Here is Jessica. Jessica Kleinschmidt, thank you so much for coming on. Is it Kleinschmidt or Kleinschmidt?
Kleinschmidt.
Kleinschmidt.
We are German.
German.
We are German. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I've been really excited to talk to you for the past couple months.
We're finally doing it too.
I
It took us
know.
a while.
Exactly.
But I was thinking about it on the drive here. I was like, I'm important enough where I can I'm sorry I'm so busy with my life, and not in a stuck up way, but I was praying to have too much to do to where it can finally come, and now I'm here, and it's great. The setup's gorgeous. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. That does mean a lot to me coming from you in the media industry. It shows that I'm going the right direction.
You are.
The biggest question I want to ask you first is being in sports media. Why sports media? How did that happen?
I'm a former baseball player with the boys because a lot of people, I'm going to push this back actually because I do this thing. I didn't know softball existed. I thought only girls could play baseball. And one day I was sitting in the bleachers and my brother was playing and my dad was coaching and they needed a right fielder. And my dad was like, well, can you just stay in the outfield? We need a body. It's basically a practice. It's a scrimmage. It's fine. And I threw the ball and I look over and my dad is, he sees me throw the ball and I throw it with such conviction and such strength that it kind of felt like a record screech. And the next thing you know, I'm like, oh my gosh, oh shit, I can throw this ball. And I became addicted to baseball. Obviously, time goes on and I couldn't play professionally. I didn't know that women couldn't play professionally, but I got bitten by the bug. And I was about 10 or 11 years old when we went to my first A's game, actually. The moment I sat down, the third baseman hit a home run. And then I found this program on the ground, and it was Eric Chavez. And we shared the same birthday, quite a few years apart. But I remember that week in baseball, playing Little League, I switched from first to third base. And as time went on, actually that same game, Mark Kotze was playing center field. Now he's my manager. And so we drove home that day and I remember telling my dad, can women be reporters? Because I see all these guys on TV. We were sports junkies. We watched Sports Center Top 10 to nauseum. And he was like, not really, but let's try it out. And this is when sideline reporting for women was finally becoming a thing, but that was all women did. And so as time went on, I realized, well, why can't I be the first? As the first girl on my baseball team, I was the first girl to make 11, 12 All-Stars. Why can't I be the first whatever? So as time went on, I loved reading, I loved writing, I loved talking, and I knew that I was not going to be a professional baseball player. I didn't know that until later on, because I had the Delulu at a young age. And as I got older, the Delulu turned into just hard work. And my dad, who was a beautiful person, told me from the beginning, okay, well, let's do that. And it was so imperative to have a male figure in my life who, despite being old school, knew I had to work, and he knew I had to work hard in order to do this. But the best part was that he's like, all right, let's make this happen. So from then on, I just started working extra hard, and I loved English and I loved writing. I still do. Obviously, words, I'm obsessed with them. And I turned it into a career. And that's the kind of the short version, because it was a lot of trials and tribulations. And so I basically turned my love for baseball into talking about it, writing about it, sharing it with people, and learning about those people who are involved in the sport as well. And here we are.
Wow, that's all. And you're born and raised in the Bay Area.
No, I was actually born in Maryland, Baltimore,
Oh,
Maryland, and I was raised in Reno, Nevada. So it was a 4 hour trip, 4 hour drive to the game, 4 hour drive back. We got tickets randomly through our little league.
wow.
Yeah, so I'm a Reno girl for sure. I've been here for 6 years though, so this is my home now. But
Gotcha. So even when you were playing softball, what was it about being a reporter that just really excited you? Was it I can talk to the players? Was it I have questions that I'm not hearing? Or what was it that specifically was like, that's the niche that I have to follow?
I'm a very curious person, and that used to be like kind of annoying to everybody around me, because I would ask, what do you mean by that? That makes no sense. And the beauty is now I don't feel guilty, or I don't believe in stupid questions, because when I would ask the quote stupid questions, some of my mentors and the people that I looked up to asked stupid questions. Those stupid questions turned into quite brilliant answers, whether it was them saying that's a stupid question, or they would say, well, that's interesting because of this. A, I'm a woman. I never played Major League Baseball. So these guys know that. So if I'm asking them a question, it's coming out of genuinely, I'm trying to be your voice right now. And I've only played up into a certain amount. Because when I switched from baseball to softball, I played until I was about 19. There was nothing else I could do beyond that. It just wasn't going to happen. And so from then on, the game's ever evolving. People are always changing. The mentalities are different. And these things are always shifting. I know. I lied. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to move. I'm a mover. And as time went on, I knew that in order to better myself, it's a vain thing too. Like, I want to make sure I'm the best. And if I'm going and you put a microphone in front of my face, I want to make sure that I'm covering my ass and I'm covering their ass. And I even talked to a baseball player recently, and he's younger. He just got drafted, I want to say, in the last 2 or 3 years. And I had to ask him like a really fucked up question after a tough outing for him. And the day after, I was like, I'm so sorry we had to approach you with that. And he's like, no, I know you guys have to. A lot of these guys have media training now that everything's moving upwards, and technology is everything. And social media, people are tweeting before any information is out. People want to be the first with the information. And he said, no, we had a media training from one of the bigger names in the game. And he said, these media people are an extension of you. Some people take it and run with it. I couldn't care less about breaking news. I know it's important, but I genuinely love the people that I work with and the people that I cover. And if they trust me with their story, I think they should be able to trust me to make sure I'm telling it correctly.
That's always, especially in today's day and age with Twitter and everything, like literally something happens and 5 seconds later, like you said, it's out in the universe already. It's not the old school day where the reporters would, okay, I got this information, I'm gonna put out a story next Monday with how the game went.
Newspaper and all of that. It's so different.
Yeah.
And a lot of shit was off the record, and that's not the case anymore.
Yes.
Because people, it's hard to trust. People aren't old school anymore, and people got their way like by blogging, and I did too. I'm a blogger by heart, and I understand that, but it's interesting how people got in the industry, and you can tell them quite off, right off the bat, like how they got there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a great question for you is how do you find that balance? Because there is a sense of if I do more of the juicier stories, I might keep it for my career, but it comes at the cost of maybe, I don't want to say violating somebody's trust, but maybe put them in a light that they would prefer not to. But at the same time, you have a profession to do. And I see this all the time with the people on ESPN,
Yeah.
NBC. Stephen A is probably one of the better ones. He'll say something on there and
Well, he's more of a
opinionated.
hot take talking head compared to me. I mean, like, he was a former, he'd write up a column, like he knows the ins and outs and he knows what a newsroom looks like. This is going to sound cheesy. I'm not just doing this for clicks. I would rather take my time getting to the biggest level and developing a trust with these guys. And a lot of times it's the cheesy stuff. Like I talked about Kyle McCann, one of our catchers, and he grew up in Georgia. He was from Georgia, Atlanta Braves guy. And he's like, yeah, we have a dog named Chip. I'm like, oh, after Chipper Jones? He's like, no, Chocolate Chip. And I was like, right, of course. That stuff I'll tweet about. And like certain moves and this and that. I just don't really care. Like the people that want to break the news, they have their own thing. I would rather tell the cool stories and the stuff that you might be breaking news because everybody's going to eventually figure that out. But if I get a nugget about this more, it's more personal or on brand for me is the off the field stuff, by staying true to what they're doing on the field is important. That stuff I don't feel guilty about because I get to introduce you to you, the person under the uniform, as opposed to what he does in the box score.
So how much do you work with them in terms of, hey, I like to write a story about you regarding this. Are you cool with that? Or would you just say, hey, I want to write it, I'm going to write it, and then, you know, if you guys don't like it, it's nothing bad about you, but, you know,
I would
how do
never
you play
tell a
that?
guy that if this is not okay, it's not okay. Because first of all, I don't really come at it from that way. It's more or less, because I'm mainly radio too. Like I'm not really writing as much as I used to. Radio is, hey, I have to talk about this. This is a storyline that I want to talk about, especially if it's post game. I have an hour of free time. So I'm like this for an hour after the game. I just have to talk to myself. If nobody's calling in, mama's on her own. And so a lot of times I'm just like having a conversation with them, and that kind of is where it goes. But most of the time, yeah, I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about writing on this. And that's also a different approach as well. Like if I'm saying I'm going to write on this, that's a different mentality. It's also a different setup. If I'm going to do radio, that's more of like, hey, we're going to have a quick conversation for 5 minutes because that's going on the pregame show. If it's on camera, it's kind of like this. It's more like a long form, like 10 minutes of, I'll start with what's working for you at the plate. And then let's talk about your childhood trauma a little bit, you know, like kind of like that.
Got
and
it.
so stuff like that. And I love the challenge of it because you get to be different every single day. If it's something personal, like a written story, that's probably going to be 3 or 4 different conversations because so many times we take a quote out of context. And I used to be this person. I worked in a newsroom. I knew how we did the clickbait thing and how we'd aggregate. And I'm still aggregating off of people's work. That's part of my job as well. But it's more or less saying, I think I'm going to write about this. Can we have a conversation about it? And then there's a couple more follow-up conversations because A, I need clarity. And then B, I'm going to go talk to either 2 of his teammates, his parents, his former coaches, and like not just say like he said this isn't true, but a different perspective, and to show that I'm a damn good journalist and I got multiple people to talk about it.
That is so incredible. And this has been going on for you, what, 6 years, I think, right?
Well, it's my 6th year covering the A's, but I think I got my first paycheck maybe 8 years ago. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
So in the time that you've been doing this, what have you learned the most about the industry, or because it's changing so fast with social media that, hey, every day is like, oh, this is kind of the new thing that we're doing here. And a lot of the media, because you used to work at NBC Sports Bay Area, or was it NBC as a whole?
NBC Sports Bay Area.
Sports Bay Area. And I just don't see them the way that they used to be when they did the
What do you mean
post
by
game.
that?
Remember Greg Papa? Like
course.
they would always have. Is he still around? He's doing the.
I think so.
He's doing the Niners, I think
yeah.
now. But they would always have the post game shows, whether it was for the A's or the Raiders, or they have the sit down. Like, hey, today is the Raider talk. We're gonna talk four guys together talking about the thing, and then I just slowly started seeing it go away. Or maybe it's on at times. I don't watch TV that much anymore, and I just see him shift to more the social media stuff, how to make clicker things, because that's what people are watching now. So with that change in the industry, is that something that you've seen as a necessity, or more like, actually, I like the way it's going now. I like that we're changing maybe the traditional media in a sense and doing things that maybe the younger generation's looking for. And by doing that, do you ostracize the older generation that's like, no, I like the old school, turn on the radio, hear Bill King talk about the A's and just do it that way? And or Monty Poole used to write for the Oakland Tribune, like, I like that way.
Yeah.
But this is the way things are going now.
The way that he writes is still old school. Like we can't take that away. He's got such a beautiful relationship with everybody in the Bay. And because I used to edit his work and it would just give me warm fuzzies. Him and Ray Ratto, I would edit their interviews, edit their articles. And it felt like,
well, that guy's a character.
Oh,
Ray.
Uncle Ray.
Man.
We love Uncle Ray. They stay true to who they are but then they're ever adjusting too. And you're right. We're always transitioning. The people reading, the people watching have shorter attention spans now. We want to introduce the younger people into, especially baseball. It's the most impossible sport to market. I don't hate anything where it's going. For me, I embrace it because when I first got in the industry, I was told by somebody who was trying to have me as an agent, just be good at one thing, like just hone in on your sideline reporting. And I was like, but I like writing and I like the digital aspect. And then as time went on, I was like, why can't I do it all? So I try to be like the 5-tool player of sports media. And I'm not only doing that, but I'm doing it really well. So I do A's pregame and postgame for the radio, and that goes to a podcast. So that's embracing both sides. So you have to remember that as well. When I first got in the industry, I reminded myself that one piece of content can be created in to 5 different avenues. So you write something, why not do a radio hit, do a quick on-camera hit about it, do a YouTube show on it, do a podcast on it. I was lucky enough where I was able to do all those avenues. So now we're embracing those things and you're getting hired to do it. And luckily, if you are lucky, I wasn't in certain aspects where they would give you all those opportunities, but you're paid for each and every single one of them. That wasn't the case in certain aspects. We hired her to write. We're going to give her a show. We're going to give her a podcast. We're just not going to pay her to do those extra things. We hired her to do a writing thing. So that happens a lot in this industry. I think it's bullshit. So luckily I'm at a point in my career now where I can request to do all these things. And I like doing all those things because I get bored very, very easily. I had a podcast today and I did another podcast later. I did a quick hit for the radio. And then I did a radio production the other day. And I can write if I want to. I can go on camera if I want to. I did a YouTube show the other day. So just stuff like that I love because you can A, show off that you're versatile, and B, who's going to argue that you can't do it all? So if you want to hire me, there's nobody better that's going to be able to do it than me because I can confidently say I can do it all and do it really well.
You are a hustler. That is so awesome to hear.
Yeah.
And with that, I got to ask you this. How do you find time in your life to do all this stuff here? And then you also want to live your own personal life. You want to go out, travel. You want to go have dinner with friends and whatnot. But this is a demanding career.
It is.
Like, you have to follow the team. You got to be ready to go when they're ready to go. Then
Yeah.
the late night. If it goes to 15 innings, okay, guess what? I'm doing the post game at midnight or whatever it is. I just got to do what I got to do.
Yeah.
How do you find any sort of balance with that? And I'm asking this specifically because for people in our age group, specifically women, that's a big question that's coming up. Hey, we're in our late 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever it is. And, maybe there's a certain mindset that we thought our life was going a certain way, but following career, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. And maybe the balance in your personal life isn't there. Not you specifically, but in general, maybe the balance.
No, it's not there.
You can go with that.
Okay,
How do you do that?
I think as women, we're constantly put in a box. Either you follow your career or you have a family. You're not allowed to have both. And for me, I always was stubborn about that. And I said, I want to have both. But as far as my personal life, like dating, you better date me between the off season time. Like, I delete all my apps before the season starts. I make sure all of that stuff's either taken care of before and then the moment the season's over, postseason's done, if I have no World Series coverage, maybe I'll put them back on, but it's just not a priority. But my personal life is super important because I have the best friends in the whole wide world. My nephew's 8 and he's playing Little League and he's so good. And I want to make sure I'm there for him too. You find time. I do it a little bit differently. And like my nephew just the other day, he made All-Stars and now they can stream that. So I can watch that from home. I was literally watching his game, doing the A's game, and then prepping for the podcast all together. Luckily, we can do that because of how this is in 2024, you're able to do it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my best friends work in the industry too. Like if we don't text for 5 days, it's probably because Danny is covering the College World Series, or I'm in the midst of an 8-game homestand and we have to pay attention to that. And I have all pre and post. And then Melanie went to London to cover the BBC. We're probably not going to hear from her for three or 4 days. So it's just one of those things, like I don't take it personally either. And all of my best friend, the whole wide world of 20 years, she knew when we were at dinner one time and she's like, can you autograph this napkin for me because you're going to be famous one day? She still has the napkin. And she knows if I don't write back, it's because I'm super busy. But then you just click the TV or you click the radio and I'm on there and I'm talking. They know I'm alive, so we're good.
Yes.
And so you find time. But honestly, like my job is also very social. And I was talking to my therapist about it because she was asking me how dating was going. And I said, well, I talk to people all day, every day. And I have 5 or 6 conversations. And then by the end of it, I have to talk for an hour. And if people don't call in, I'm either talking to myself or I'm talking to 4 or 5 other people who are calling to complain or rave about the A's. And then afterward, you want me to go do that for another hour? Like, that's exhausting. And she understood that. And she was also very open with like, maybe I'm not in that right mindset. And it's just not the most important thing to me. So for me, though, I could make time if I needed to. You are right. It is about balance. And we meet people like over social media. So that's always a part of it too. But I just feel like it's draining. So I'd rather like come out here, put the energy into my brand and my career, because I feel like that will never let me down. And I can only get better. And I feel like I've been in the industry for a long time, but I feel like I also have so much I need to do and learn and to be better. So for me, making my personal life, I can kind of put those two together because all my best friends that are in the industry, I can learn from them and do what I need to do. So in that aspect, it certainly helps. I think I'm still trying to find the balance. I don't think you truly do. And I feel like we can have everything we want in life. I just sometimes don't think it's all at the same time.
You know, so glad that you brought that up because I learned this a long time ago. Well, I have an aunt who's about 85 years old and she's never been married. She's, as far as she tells me, I think she was a feminist back in the day, like really hardcore,
Wow.
like anti-man, like the hardcore
Oh, I don't
ones.
like anti-man, but
So she was very like, when she was helping to raise me, she was that kind of cooler aunt that when my mom and my dad were busy working, whatever, she'd
I'm a
take me
cool
and
fucking aunt, bro. I'm such a cool aunt.
I believe you are because
Yeah.
you're the kind of person like, yeah, nieces and nephews, that's the person you want to hang out with.
Hell
Look where she's
yeah.
going to take you to
Oh, totally.
behind the scenes. But I learned back then that even though she never had her own children, the fact that she was helping to raise me and my sister
Yeah.
and my cousins, she got that fulfillment of doing what I think we as humans want to naturally do, which is kind of help breed the next generation. I think we get so caught up today about saying, I need to have my own biological blood child because that's what you're supposed to do.
Totally.
And I get it. And I'm not knocking anybody for it, especially in my industry. I mean, people who have kids, they are doing awesome things. They're working crazy hours, but they love their kids. Of course, they'll complain about, the time and whatever.
Totally.
That's part of it. But they love their kids. They're great parents and they're making it happen. But they even have, I think there's still some tribes in like Micronesia where when a woman has a child, it's pretty much given to the tribe already. So the community raises them as a whole. So there's no mom and dad, there's their auntie and uncle. They're all helping to raise the kid to make a better society. And I think if we think more of that in general about you don't have to have your own biological child or might have my own biological child, but as long as you're still involved in kids' lives and you're helping to make the next generation better,
Absolutely.
you're sort of fulfilling that same thing.
Yeah.
So in today's day and age, you can have that career and do everything you got to do for follow it, move however many hours you have to put into it. But as long as you're still in the lives of children, especially if you have nieces and nephews, that kind of fulfills a lot of that. I had a guest on a while ago. Her name was Melissa. She works at Tempo. She's one of the top trainers over there. And she was telling me she used to be married and they got divorced, but he had a child that she pretty much helped raise as her own daughter. So even though they divorced amicably, it just didn't work out, she's still in the daughter's life.
Yeah.
She is that cool aunt now. And she has her own group of nieces and nephews in her family that she helps to raise, take care of, take into fun places. When they become too much or the diapers need changes, she can give them back to the parents.
Totally.
Say, here you go.
And I love that too. But I also told my brother, I was like, I want to be there for the messy shit too. Literally and figuratively.
Oh, they'll love
like
you.
Because my mother was like a caretaker before she passed away, and she was the one that got to take care of all the kids, both kids. And I was like, I want to know the diaper changing stuff. I don't want to be the cool aunt who's just sitting there like, oh, cool, we're gonna watch a baseball game, or do you want field pat? Like, cool. I wanted to make sure like I knew how to change the diaper and dealing with the throw up and like all the grossness. I felt like that was important. I don't want to be the superficial aunt who doesn't understand that children are a lot, because
That's next level aunt right
well,
there.
I mean,
Wow. That's
who
awesome.
knows what's going to happen in my future? Like if tomorrow I meet the future love of my life and we have kids, like I don't want to go into it blindly. And I'm very realistic about all of it, because you have to remember, like I work for the A's where we have Jenny Kavnar, and she's a mom to 2 kids. She goes on the road. She's the first primary female play-by-play on television in Major League Baseball. More importantly, though, she's a mother of 2 and she's a wife. You don't really see that, especially in this industry. Men can go on the road and it's okay. When she does it, it's like, oh, well, you have kids. You're really going to do that?
Is that more from other women or is that from men who are telling her that?
I think it's mainly me exaggerating what I think people are saying. That's totally just out of context for myself. But, in baseball, I know my demographic, and it is not my aged women. It is 50-plus-year-old white men. That's who's watching the game. There's nothing I can change about that. We would like to, but it's just not the case. And so it's just one of those things. So I think with her and seeing her do it, it calmed me down, because for me, like I said, I was like, you can either have one or the other. And like, I know I say like, I'm not ready for children. I'm not ready for a husband, what have you. Like I'm open to it. I was in a serious relationship not that long ago and he had a kid. And so I get how that goes. I was also not unrealistic about the expectations there. I just don't want to be naive going into it. I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, and it's difficult when you're in a demanding career. You're not in a 9-to-5 banker job where you
Totally.
can Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. I can plan my life around
And
it.
like, it's a lot of time too. I was actually out with my girlfriend last night for dinner, and one time she told me, she's like, I didn't realize you have to go to the field at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon for a 6:40 first pitch. And I said, yep, I got to be there all day. She thought I would just show up, put a microphone in front of my face, talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then go. When it's no, I get there 1 o'clock. I'm there until like 10 o'clock, because after that I sometimes do post game stuff. So they don't understand that timing. Not to mention, like, I'm around a male heavy industry. There's men everywhere. And sometimes I'm the only woman in the clubhouse at a time. I'm the only woman there. And I forget that often. And so it's just different for women. And I know we're creating a space for women in sports media, but I don't think that it ever escapes people. I'm still treated a little bit differently, even though I've not only established myself, but like the people I work with know I deserve to be here. We're just treated a little bit differently.
I definitely want to ask you about that, because as much as you say that, I know it was a lot worse probably 40, 50 years ago. If you were the first woman in the clubhouse in 1965, they're like, it's like shock and awe to the whole system. And as time has gone on, we're seeing more women in the industry. People are like, okay, they're 20-year-olds who are coming in as players. They're like, it's normal. I don't feel as intimidated, or I can't say things around her. Whereas maybe my grandfather's generation, it would have been like, a whole different thing. They wouldn't know how to actually handle it.
I don't know how to talk to 20-year-olds because they say weird things. Of course I don't know how to talk to a 20-year-old.
Oh man.
I'm like, hey man, Riz, what's up? Like, I don't know what to do.
But that speaks to a bigger thing in industries that
my intern's 19. She's like, oh god.
Gen Zers. It's a whole different generation.
Piper, for the record, is very mature for her age, and she'll like every now and then she'll be like slay, and I'm like, oh my god, I freaking love you.
Oh man, hey, we did the same thing when we were like cool and gnarly, and the people who were Gen X were like, what's that mean? I don't know what. Yeah, you guys were uncool.
I'm terrified.
But a bigger thing with that is that in an industry that's male dominated like that, and we see it in law enforcement too, or the health industry, financial industry, there's more women going there, which is a great thing. Mm-hmm. But they might be seeing a lot of the challenges that you are. Is how do you handle it in a typically male dominated area where you're trying to go do your job, and maybe you have subordinates and you're trying to tell them what to do, and they're male, and you're like, okay, how do I handle it? How do I talk to them in a way where they get stuff done, then they don't just blow me up like you don't know what you're doing? It can be a difficult thing. What have you learned with that as far as advice that you can give to other women in a similar thing who have to work demanding jobs, and trying to balance that with also trying to deal with the male dominated area?
Yeah. And we're definitely creating a space for women in this industry. And certainly the ratio is more men. I just never really had the mentality where I gave a shit. So, and believe it or not, playing baseball with boys helped me in that regard. I know I'm female, but I also know like I can use that to my benefit. And that has a lot to do with the questions I ask. I'm not going to say that they're so feminine or what have you, but I want to know more than just what's happening in your slash line. Okay, we know that you're hitting the ball well, but I also know that X, Y, and Z occurred. Can you tell me a little bit more about that without it being too journalistic? I'm very upfront, like, hey, I'm not having a good day today. I know I'm being a little bit more emotional than I usually am. And that's not a woman thing. That's just me being very honest. Like, it's a tough day. Like, Father's Day was the other day, and my father passed away. Mother's Day, my mom died of cancer last year. I'm going to get sad in a broadcast. I cried about the Coliseum on the post-game show a few nights ago. It's just like, it's what we do. And that's not female driven. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I just fucking care a lot. And mind you, I talk about being a woman in sports is a lot like we're going up a muddy mountain and everybody around you has the correct equipment, but nobody told you that, oh yeah, there's a stop right there that you get the hiking boots and you get the sunscreen and all this other stuff. We just kind of showed up in the street clothes we were wearing and prayed for the best. And you have to be honestly a fucking freak of nature to handle this, because I mentioned the time involved. I also know that when it comes to reminding you can't like walk up and say, I'm a woman, I deserve to be here. You have to show that. Look at my resume, my media guide. I not only deserve to be there, I deserve to have a voice. And they put a microphone in front of me for that reason. I have a really good way about myself of creating relationships with not just the players, but the people surrounding them. And I did that by working hard. And I don't know how else. I'm not saying men don't work hard. I just know that I had to try a little bit harder. I even did that when I was playing baseball, not just because I was a woman, is because my dad was the president of the Little League. And I felt like I didn't want them to say that, oh, she made all-stars because she wasn't good, or because her daughter or her dad's the president of the Little League, which sounds so silly because I was 11 and 12. And this is Reno, Nevada. But politics were born when I started playing t-ball. Like, that's what happens. So it's just one of those things. I don't know. I often forget. So it's just one of those things until people remind me, like, oh, as a woman in this industry, oh, right. That's totally like not normal. I don't know. I just show up and I deserve respect. And not only do I earn it, I make sure the people around me earn it too. And a lot of times it's just about not thinking too much and going in there, getting the job done. And we're on the same playing field in certain aspects. Obviously, when Dallas Braden's on the panel, or Bip Roberts, Dave Stewart, I can't confidently say, yeah, I know what it's like to play Major League Baseball, because that's a fucking lie. But I can go up there and say, I can learn from this person who has a major league career and try to do my best to understand their message, what they went through. And I can certainly say that after all these years I've covered the game, I know what to ask, and I'm a very curious person, and that creates a dialogue. And that's just the basis of my career.
Do you ever feel like you have to prove yourself? And if so, is that more to the players, to your competition, your fellow media people, or the audience? Is that ever in your mind at all, or was it?
Always.
Still is?
But then I have to, it's mainly to myself too. Like, I'm so hard on myself. Like, I asked a stupid question recently and I let it ruminate for 12, 24 hours, to the point where I was almost I was like spiraling. I'm an overthinker. And then I remembered, who fucking cares? Luckily, these athletes have goldfish brains, not in a bad way. Like, they're taught that. Like Ted Lasso says, like, have the memory of a goldfish, because you have to show up the next day and hit one time out of 4, and that is you being a successful hitter. So they don't care about my question. It's whatever. They're not letting it bother them. And I reminded myself of that too. And like, to see how far like I've come along, and is something that I've certainly thought about. But there are days where I'm like, that was the worst post game ever. Like, what did I just do? And nobody that listened will agree with me. Plus, and I'm sure you deal with it too. Like, when you're behind the scenes, you're like, that was fucking awful. That was awful. And the next thing you know, you listen to it, like, hey, that wasn't that bad. And most of the time, the people that are listening don't have the same A, negative attitude that you do that day, or B, they have any idea the work that went into it. So me stuttering, what have you, and I do that a lot, that doesn't mean I fucked up. I just know how I had to take a few breaths, and I embrace the pauses, which you have to do on the radio. And so that saves me. So the pressure, for sure, fans terrify me. The competition terrifies me. The players don't really terrify me. I'm not really scared about them or the coaching staff or anything like that, but it's always myself. That's who I struggle with the most, because I know what I'm capable of, but I also know the capability I haven't even touched the surface yet. So I know that this is still a learning process, and learning is a verb. It's an action. We're constantly doing that. And I embrace failure a lot more, like, oh, I messed up. That's so cool, because I'm actually going to get better from this. I know that sounds cheesy AF, but it's so true.
No, yeah.
Mark Kotze preaches it all the time. He's like, you have to learn from failure. And it's so true. Like, everything I've ever done correctly is because I messed up at one point.
And that is, I will tell you that there's an unspoken thing. There's a level of respect that people have when we see you doing something that we're maybe too scared to do, or like, I could never do that job. When I first started doing this, I didn't know anything about audio, video. The idea of putting my face on a camera, when at the time I didn't want anything to do.
And did people give you shit for it?
Nobody did. And I knew that, but it wasn't until I did it enough times and I started getting from my close friends, like, dude, that's awesome. Yeah. And then of course you self-criticize yourself, like, you know what, the lighting was off, or the camera was off-centered. Yeah. You start picking out the little things, but you realize people don't really care.
They don't.
Like, a good example is Joe Rogan. If you look at his setup, objectively, it's a horrible setup.
Totally.
The lighting is washed out. The cameras are far away. They're not the high def 40 HD cameras. The intro is not, it's pretty bland. But nobody cares about that when the camera starts. They just care about the conversation. Yeah. People forget right away what the name of the microphone is, or what brand it is. They don't care. They want the content.
I will say, on the other half, when I had a really shitty setup, I couldn't have a good conversation because I was like, there's internet issues and all this other stuff. But that's part of the failure of it too.
Yeah. And if you go back and look at my first few episodes, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that could have totally done better. Or maybe when I synced it, the voice was off slightly. Like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, the mouth is moving here, but the voice is over there. And you know what? I learned from it. Nobody ever said, hey, you know what? You really screwed up there. And anybody that does that, and I'm learning that with the YouTube thing, 99% of the time, it's trolls and bots and not even real people.
Yeah.
It's just some program that likes to go out there and just,
But you know what's interesting is as you progress in your career, I deal with that too. A lot of people criticized me over the last few seasons about little things that I was doing wrong. They were all people who had no reason to. However, when my respected broadcasters who are Hall of Fame broadcasters who have been doing this for years, if they want to give me feedback, I will stop what I'm doing and listen. Done.
yeah.
Absolutely done. But if it's somebody who watches baseball games every now and then, peaked in JV, shut your fucking mouth.
I love it. You realize there's people out
That's
there.
my demographic. That's who's clicking on my stuff.
I get you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
It just, to me, it's like, wow, you like certain people who just do that just to egg you on. Like, you get to, aha, I got you moment. It's like, what are you really doing all day? You might be sitting in front of your computer for 15 hours. That's all you do all day is to be that internet and that troll. I mean, that kind of just says, I don't have time to deal with the negative comments.
Yeah.
And most people who actually enjoy things, they don't actually spend time to go, wow, I really
Totally.
enjoyed it. They show it by always clicking on it, always tuning in.
Yeah.
And then when you see them afterwards, like, you know what? I've been watching it for 5 years or whatever it is, and I love the way that you carry the post game. I love the energy that you bring, and I can't put my finger on it. I just like the content that you guys bring. I hope you guys don't break it up. Like, the talk now is the NBA on TNT crew that's probably going to break up. There's negotiations with the NBA. They might not have TNT anymore.
Yeah.
And Chuck announces retirement, so now we're like, man, that you watched that post game show because of the banter with all the people there, and just how they were able to egg people on. I almost don't care about the game. Okay, I'm ready to watch post game. What are they going to talk about? This is gonna be
Well, and it's
awesome.
interesting too, because like when I'm watching those broadcasts, I just know like the nuts and bolts that go behind it. So I barely pay attention to some of those segments or to the banter really, because I'm worried about the segment. Like, I hope is this A block? Is this B block? Like, what's going on? But then you take a step back and you remember, because I have such a different eye now. And even with my work, there are times where I'll be working for 4 hours and I'm exhausted. And then I'm like, we haven't even thrown the first pitch yet. I've done all this prep. I did all my pregame hits, got all the interviews I need. It's still 6 o'clock. We have 45 minutes until first pitch, 40 minutes until first pitch. But that's the behind the scenes stuff is no different than the athletes. You talk about like JJ Bleday put all this work in the off season, made these adjustments with his hands and his lower half. Now the product is fucking phenomenal on the field. How is that any different than what we're doing? So all the prep I did, next thing you know, like my pregame's probably going to go really smooth. Postgame's probably going to be great. And it's the same thing. It's me ranting. But the people who appreciate my rants are the ones who know that I have a reason to be ranting because I love this team. I follow this team. I know what to talk about. I know what to not talk about, those aspects. So it's just one of those things that you pay attention to the different aspects, the more you further and you know what goes into it. But it's like on a bigger scale. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, like I went from NBC Sports Bay Area to a regional network. I've done LB network stuff. I've done the A's. They're 3 different avenues, but they all have the same thing. Mm-hmm. I know how to do a segment. I know how to do a really good interview. I know what to talk about. I know how to tee off. If somebody comes at me with an answer that I'm not expecting and it's not on my sheet of questions, you have to know the good follow-up stuff. Because same thing, you have to have that banter going.
Yep.
Just like what you said, like I'm not going to touch on all the questions, but did we have a good conversation? Fuck yeah, we did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people can tell, like, when they know that you care, it almost, I forget the specific question you asked, but just that unspoken body language of it. They're just getting into it and I'm attached to it, but I can't put my finger on what she actually said.
Yeah.
Versus maybe somebody else who almost very stoic, very robotic. Here's the question. Here's the answer. You may have asked good questions, but if there's that emotional side of it that you can't put your finger on, that part of the brain.
But we can't take that personally. And I know you listened to one of my interviews. We were talking about like if you're talking to like JD Davis, if I wanted a 5-minute interview with him, he's going to give me a 10-minute interview. I know that going into it. There are certain players that I know I have 4 minutes and it's going to be fucking hell getting 4 minutes out of them. So I prepped 10 questions for them. I know it's going to be back and forth, back and forth. I had one earlier. They were like, we need 4 minutes from this person. And I was like, oh gosh. And I looked at my sheet and I'm like, I need 11 questions. If it was a JD Davis conversation, I need 4. Because that's just how it is. And it's not that it's all question related, but I know JD is going to let me have many answers to have a follow-up and then a follow-up on the follow-up, those types of things. And
Right.
there's times where you have to read the room. There's times you have to understand what's going on. The only thing you have to constantly remember is like when it's a pitcher, no matter what the outing is, you have to talk to them after the game. If they're the starting pitcher, no matter what, that's part of the situation. So those things happen, but you don't know who's going to be the hero of that game until it's the 8th, 9th inning, you know? So then you have a certain amount of time to get the questions, sometimes very last minute. I had an MC Hammer interview that I was not prepped for. Did you think I was going to turn that shit down? Absolutely freaking not. And I was somewhat prepped because I was going to interview him for like a writing aspect. But I look over at my producer, like, Jessica, you're going to go interview MC Hammer. I'm like, yeah, I was going to do that. They're like, oh, no, you have to be the talent and you have to go on camera and do it. And I was like, okay. Wild card game in front of 55,000 fans. I freaking did it. Wow. And he actually put a lot of stuff to rest. Everybody says he was the bat boy for the A's, and that was his brother. So he shut down a billion rumors because I got a last minute chance to ask him a question. And he shut it down. So just stuff like that.
Wow.
And I get off on that. I'm like, oh, I don't have time to prep. I'm going to, like, this is going to, no pun intended, I'm going to hit this out of the park.
That's amazing. But it also speaks to the professionalism of the people that you're talking to. I mean, I can't imagine being in your shoes. It's a playoff game and somebody, maybe they're ahead in the count 3-0, bases loaded, you're down by one, and then you hit a grounder to shortstop, and then the game's over, and you had someone right there on third, maybe because you misread the pitch or whatever it is, and then you have to go talk to that person who's already in the mindset of like, I just blew that, my season's over.
That same game, Sean Manaea, he had a terrible outing, and I remember looking at him. This is the nicest, most friendly man in the world, and I will never forget it. He was sitting at the table. He had a nice, I want to say like a filet mignon and Alfredo in front of him. And he just stared into space. That's all he did. And it broke my heart. And I remember thinking like, we can't talk to him, but he was like, nope, you have to talk to me. That's part of the gig. That's what you have to do. And you're right. There's a respect there, but we have a job to do just like they do. And I appreciate that. It's not easy, but you're right. And the thing that I love about that is when a player is going through a slump, an 0-19 slump, you know who knows he's going through the slump? The player. If I'm coming at him saying like, did you know this is what's happening?
Oh, man.
And he was like, no, I had no idea. I know how to frame the questions to whether I acknowledge the problem, they acknowledge the problem, and then we have a conversation about like what goes on in your mind, because sometimes they're very black and white. It's like, oh yeah, well, this number isn't working out. Sometimes it's just baseball. And then I know how to take that little cliche and turn it into a conversation. And also it depends on the person, what have you. But you have to be prepared. And nobody's more prepared than me. For my podcast too, like it's not just baseball. So people just think I do an A's podcast or I'm the A's reporter and that's it. I'm short and to the point that you can follow on Awful Announcing. And
Yes.
we're all major platforms. I like the challenge of it not being baseball related, because I had a football player on earlier, a former football player on. You go through the ranks of all these different types of people, because I like the prepping aspect, and not knowing a lot about the sport has actually helped me in those regards, because I'm curious about that person and what's going on. And sometimes the curiosity makes them feel better because they're like, oh, you're interested? This is cool. And so we go off on those tangents. And a lot of times we don't have to make it super sports or their career, or whatever, centric. And I can talk about them, just who they are as a person, and they appreciate that too. And you can easily tell right off the bat, also, these guys, if they don't want to talk about themselves, there's 25 other guys in the clubhouse they'd be happy to talk about, so that you can talk about that stuff too. So you got to know the room, you got to know how to present yourself, and you have to know that whatever answer they give you is going to be the correct one. It's just what you do with it.
Wow. And I want to get into your podcast, but I want to take a step back to go to when you interview people, because a lot of what maybe younger people may not see at first is the trust that you have to build with the players.
Yeah.
And unlike maybe a job where you're in it for 25, 30 years, a player could be here today and he could be traded tomorrow, and now he's on a different team. Mm-hmm. And if you left a bad impression with them, then that's going to get out to the new team, in case maybe you end up going to work for that team.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, don't talk to this person, that person, they did me wrong, whatever.
Totally.
So talk about how just building trust with the people that you're talking to, and what things you try to avoid asking them, or how you frame the questions. You just talked about that, where you don't want to put them in a bad light, but they understand at the same time you have a job to do and there are things you have to report on, versus maybe going for that juicy piece of, let me find out what's really behind the scene or whatever that might get more clicks and likes, but also sacrifices the relationship with the person that you're talking to.
Yeah, and I'm lucky that I've established myself enough. There's a couple of guys that came on the A's where I know their agent, so they'll just give them a heads up, like, "Hey, Jess is the team reporter. She's going to talk to you." I also like to do MLB debuts, so I talk to their family. Which you want to get
Oh
in with the
wow.
players, get in with the moms, get in with the moms, get in with the wives. They'll love you after that. And so just those types of aspects. And honestly, I just introduced myself. I'm like, "Hey, like I'm the team reporter," and then we start from there. And a lot of times I follow up and I'll say, "You said this. Do you mind if on the broadcast I say this? Is that being fair to what you said?" And most of the time they're like, "Yeah, whatever." And I'm like, "No, I don't. I need to make sure that I don't like fuck you over. You know, I want because I honestly want to understand too. I didn't know what you meant by that." And so that's just a lot of me doubling up on those aspects. And a lot of times for the radio, it's back and forth, this type of stuff. So I don't have to do much of an intro and outro because the guy speaks for himself. But if on the post game stuff, I had a 5 minute conversation with a guy about, like, I had a conversation with Joey Estes about him visualizing his future and manifestation, and not like manifestation heavy stuff, but he was like, "I'm going to be a major league player." I just had like a good 5 6 minute conversation about that, and I just followed up with questions, but it wasn't a follow up like, "When you say this, what do you mean by that?" But I was writing stuff down just because I told him I want to make sure I remember this for the post game show because this is so interesting to me. And he had these little anecdotes about when I played high school baseball. I just wanted it more than my teammates. Not saying that my teammates goofed around a lot. He's like, "But that was the mentality in high school baseball. Like I was playing baseball with my boys. I just wanted it more than them." And then I made sure to write down specifics because I want to not only show that it was just a casual conversation, but I was specific in talking about, oh, the Lancaster team, the minor league team over there. I wanted to, that was going to be my office one day. And I would talk to my dad and we'd drive by the minor league ballpark and point to it. Like, wouldn't that be cool if that was your office? And his parents never steered him wrong. They were like, you can probably be a minor league player, if not a major league player one day. So those conversations are cool because it shows that I did my work. I had a good conversation with the guy. And a lot of times, like I mentioned, they want to talk about the other guys. Like Trevor Gott, he's injured, but he's, former Giant. He's seen a lot of baseball players, a lot of pitchers in his day. So just picking his brain about the younger pitchers and what he sees in certain aspects of them. And that's a good conversation as well. And I could have a 20-minute rant about that. We have Alex Wood. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He's a former player. He's pitched in high leverage situations. Why not pick his brain about Hogan Harris, who he sees something really cool in? Not that I need that. Hogan can talk for himself, but same thing. Like even the other day with Hogan Harris, his ERA is so low and he had one of the worst major league debuts out of anybody. And he'll admit that, but to see how far he's come after we asked the surface questions of how was your outing today? That specialty pitch, how is that working? You were cruising through. And then I can say, "Hey, Mark Kotsay said you've improved a lot since last season. What comes to mind when you think about the improvements?" I'll ask that question if it's cheesy as fucking Oprah all day. I don't care. But I also got the talk about the velocity and the specialty pitches and how that's working, what have you. And I also have the way I know to ask these questions if they struggled and I knew it was like their slider was not working, lost command. I just say like, "What was your approach with that pitch today?" And I don't have to say, "Hey, it fucking sucked. What happened there?" Because they know.
Yeah.
And that way I'm not leading with anything. And honestly, it's just a rude thing to do. And I don't want to come off bro-y. It's not my thing. I also don't want to act like I'm babying them because they, A, don't care, and B, don't need that. And I just want to be honest and have a good conversation. And that's why I'm really lucky, like over the years, I maintain these relationships because I'm not slimy and I want to learn from them. And if I want to learn from them, why would I be slimy?
Absolutely. And people can tell right away I'm putting myself in the frame of like a player who's
I'm not going to bullshit. Like, but I'm also not going to come in there and be like, "Oh, guys, like I want to learn," but they know that I have a job to do as well.
exactly. But I could see them seeing
If you
that
guys
right
are
away.
watching this, I'm so sorry if this is not the relationship we have, but they're like, "I can't stand her. She's so annoying."
Let me tell you specifically
You're
about
like,
that.
actually, yeah.
But I can tell that when they first meet you and you already come off like she knows her shit. She knows
Yeah.
what she's talking about. She knows what she wants. It frames the narrative for them going forward. Okay, Jessica knows what she's going to ask. I can't get around it. I don't have to baby her or give her softball answers or try to, speak nicely in a way. No, she knows what she's doing.
And if they do, I can get more out of them than that.
Oh,
And,
really?
And,
Okay.
and not even in a bad way. It's like, I think sometimes they're honest. They want to keep it short. I understand that. But oftentimes I just have to be like, hey, I know you're, I don't say it, but I'll say, I know you're saying this, but what do you mean by that? And because I just want to understand who they are as a person, so I know how to come out with them from like the future. And that, as time goes on, you know who to approach about certain things. There's always 2 or 3 guys in the locker room or the clubhouse that you know are going to give you a good answer about what went wrong that day. Usually it's a catcher. Shay Langoliers, you are amazing. You've always talked to us. I appreciate you. Kyle McCann's the same way. And they're learning from us as well, especially the younger guys, you know, and I know they have media training, but training is nothing until they're in the belly of the beast and thrown into it. And there's probably nothing, and I've never done this, but I would assume there's probably nothing more humbling or welcome to the show than blowing a game and having to talk to the media about it.
Yeah.
I feel awful that they have to go through that, but I also know that's part of it.
It's a business. It's in the contract. Like you shall do this, and you don't want to be that guy that says, I don't want to go talk to the media, because then it's just awkward for everybody. Then you got to deal with the aftermath of that. It's
And
just
I'm
like,
an
go
empath
there.
too, and that really sucks. I'm like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, like, I know we're gonna throw you to the wolves, but it's part of the
I'm so
business.
sorry. Yeah.
Well, I got to ask you this. You ask a lot of pointed questions in there, and you get really engaged, and it gets the information that you need, which helps you be as successful as you are.
Thank you.
How do you shut it off, or do you shut it off when you're dating? And you're like, does it become an
I
interview
don't
with
shut
some
it
random
off.
guy? Like, oh, she's interviewing me. This is kind of weird. What do I do?
I think there's an endearing quality to me because I'm genuinely a curious person. And the last date I went on, it was very, I tried to shut it off, but it was also during the off season where I haven't been interviewing a lot of people. So I don't want to say I was like practicing, but I went back into like the vibe of like, okay, this is interesting. This is cool. No, I think it's a lot of times like a podcast interview, to be honest, when I'm on a date.
Oh man.
Yeah. But I don't think that's bad. And I don't say that I wouldn't go into, I don't compare them necessarily, but I also know that if I'm getting a response from somebody, I'm assuming it's a legitimate response. Sometimes you can't be very forthright, but the point of my podcast is I want to know about everything. I've had really tough conversations on this podcast with people. I've had a former NFL player talk about the trauma that is involved leaving the NFL, which to me, trauma is something I didn't realize how deep level trauma or how complicated it can be, and it's not black and white. Or Cassidy Hubbard, she talked about like struggling becoming a mom, not like the physical aspects, but like admitting that she's a mom in this space and that only women have to deal with as like sideline reporters or women in sports media. Like that's a tough conversation. I talked to a WWE superstar about the miscarriages him and his wife went through. Like these aren't things that A, I take lightly, and B, I don't come at it like I said, I'm not slimy. And this doesn't have to do with like breaking news. This has to do with I'm learning from you too. And even if it's a date and I never see this person again, I'm sure I took away something from that. And a lot of times I think the setup is the exact same, right? We're having a conversation here. And I've had podcasts where like they would want you to have like a glass of wine on the podcast. So it's no different, right? And I've always been kind of like that. Mind you, I also go to therapy and that's over the screen too. So you could easily say like, is this a podcast? But I'm very honest. That's how my setup is. I know how to be very honest and forthright. That's one thing I always preach is authenticity. And I'm very like more buttoned up on a first date. It's also, I think I'm more job interviewee on a first date than I am podcasty, but I eventually get into like the mode where I'm like, okay, you can shut off the podcasting a little bit, but a good podcast, you're talking about real life shit. So how is that any different than like a date? I don't know.
Well, I would say to anybody that wants to slide into your DMs about that, I'd say probably the thing you don't want to do is go have a dinner date where it's like a conversation. It's like, I have to get you out of your element. Let's go do something where you can shut off that part of your brain and
Rescue
enjoy
me
the
from
rest
that.
of your
No
life.
guys want to do that. Guys are lazy these days.
Oh man,
so.
don't get.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that has to be put into it, and unfortunately, if you don't put that time in as a guy and you just go typically to the whatever dating sites, or we'll do what everybody else does, we're going to sit down and have a conversation at dinner, and you're setting the narrative that this is what it's going to be, then where's the excitement part of it? If I know that you're a sports broadcaster and you live and breathe and die with interviewing and that's your bread and butter, there's a part of you that wants this person that you're dating to get you out of that element and do something totally different. Like, hey, you know what we're doing tomorrow? Guess what? You've been skydiving. Well, I got 2 tickets. Let's go and just pick you up and let's go take care of it.
I can't get into deep conversations doing that. That's for sure.
No, but it's exciting stuff, and it takes you out of your element. But it's a skill that as you get older, I would like to think that a lot of dudes have to learn. but
Oh yeah,
if they
I'm not
don't.
a surface level person either. Like even I think it's important to have conversations. I have conversations with my best friends about this stuff. It'll start about something so surface level. The next thing you know, we're talking about all the stuff that I've dealt with in my life, which has been a lot, which is why I'm back in therapy, you know. It's not just the things that I've dealt with are not small. And so that's why I get frustrated when people want to be so surface level. Yes, I work in sports. There's so many guys when I hang out with them or want to go on a date with them, they're just like, "Who's the biggest butthead?" That's their first question is who's the biggest, the rudest guy that you've ever interviewed? That's probably 9 out of 10 times the question I get from a guy. And that is such a turnoff because it's like of all the shit that I've done in my career and in my life, that's your question. Or they say like, "Who's the cutest guy you've ever interviewed? Who do you have a crush on the team?" And it's like,
Well, they come right at
I
that now.
covered I've covered a World Series. I'm the first one of the first only 4 female broadcasters to cover a AAA game in 2023 or 2022. And those are the questions you have for me? Like, no, come on. What am I going to ask you about your boring ass job? Probably nothing.
Man, that is incredible. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's something that.
Got a
And
little heated there.
hey, no, you say what you got to say. That's why it's called real talk because this is what people need to hear. And a lot of people just get embarrassed to say certain things, or like, I don't want to sound like I'm mean, or I don't want to sound like I'm condescending. It's like sometimes you need to hear it. You need to get that
And
wake
I
up call.
hate when you put me in this direction. Oh, woman in sports. That to me has so much more depth than a normal person might think. They think microphone in front of her face and she asks questions. That's not the case. That's not the case. If that was the case, I would have had this job a bajillion years ago. I grinded. I was not getting paid. I'm a little college dropout. Like I don't have like the college education to get to where I'm at. I had to do it the hard way. I grinded. And it wasn't just by putting a microphone in front of my face. It was developing relationships. You don't really have classes that teach you how to do that. I played baseball. I didn't take a class to go do that. Like I did all those things. So there's so much more in depth. Why would you waste my time asking a surface level bullshit question? You've wasted my time.
I love it.
And I don't have a lot of time, as we discussed.
Yeah.
So if I give you an hour and a half, 2 hour window and you're wasting my time, that is a message to me that this relationship will be a waste of time.
Yeah, you got to know how to make that work with somebody who has a career like that, where it's go, 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 go,
Yeah.
go. And also, it's kind of a mindset like you can definitely have fun with people like that. But
Yeah.
if it's like, okay, we're gonna have this traditional in the box lifestyle together, it's
Yeah.
like probably not gonna work.
Totally.
Because I don't
Well,
see
you said
you.
it yourself, like on my interviews, if I get so quickly in depth and I can have a trusting conversation with somebody that fast before I've ever met you in my life, you really think I'm going to just do the boring ass shit like, raw chicken and rice? That's not the stuff I'm going to do. Unless we're like on a diet together, I will do it. But like, no. So it's one of those things that I think about a lot. If you want to compliment me on the certain things of who I am as a person, you want to join this lifestyle with me, buckle up because it's not easy. And it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time. And the fact that there's also an ego there where me giving up time spending with this person to go be at a baseball game, that's kind of it sounds cool until you're 6 months into it. And then it's,
You realize, okay, I have a job to
Yes.
do. So the fun part, like, yeah, it's there, but I have to
Totally.
focus. Otherwise, I
I'll
don't
give you
have a job
tickets.
anymore.
Sounds cool, but I'm not going to be able to talk to you for the good 4 or 5 hours.
I think this is one thing that our generation has to really understand, especially here in the Bay Area, where the cost of living is so
Yes.
ridiculous, and we're unless you're living in Manhattan, the Bay Area is like the most expensive
Yes.
place to live. So trying to think that you're going to have the typical life, which some people can, I give them all due respect for it, but to spend $1.5 million on a house
Yeah.
that anywhere else in the country is probably $200,000. To also pay the taxes we pay in California, to have two cars and then 2 kids, and the money just keeps going up like that. This is not a typical lifestyle that we can do that our parents did because the environment allowed it
Yeah.
back in the day. It's totally different now. And even in my personal life with me and my wife, we had to make some sacrifices. And I said to myself, while I may own property as an investment somewhere else, I'm not going to buy my own house to live in here in the Bay Area. It just doesn't make any
I couldn't
financial
afford
sense.
to live in my area if I bought it.
Yeah.
I have to rent or I couldn't live in that area.
Yeah, and it's a whole new dynamic that if you try to ask your parents, like, oh no, it just worked out first.
Yeah.
We bought a house and it doesn't work that way anymore. And also it's a tough one, but I understand what it is. It's like having children. It's because of partially because of the cost. It's like you do realize we both, if we had kids, we both go out and have to work 40 hours plus a week. Who's raising the kid? Well, I guess my auntie, or I had to hire a nanny. So we're going to pay a nanny to raise our child because we both have to go work to pay the nanny to do this. It kind of just doesn't make any sense unless you have that cohesive family unit who can help you. Grandma, your mother, they're taking care of the kid and helping you raise it. That could work. And I've seen many times where it has worked. But if you don't have if you're like a transplant, all your family's in Chicago and you're here by yourself and you want to do that, and the person that you're with doesn't have any family around here, it's up to you. How is that going to work? Well, you have to stay home. Well, I want to work. Well, I have to work. Well, then, okay, how are we going to do this?
Yeah, my brother had my mom. That was the grandma. And when she passed away, it's fucked up to say, but we had to figure out how to take care of the kids because we were used to having the grandma there, you know, and that was a whole aspect to it too. And I think about that a lot. I don't have parents, so that's two less people who are going to be able to take care of my kids.
Exactly.
I think about that.
But stuff like that forces us around here to have to think about what does our life look like, because it's not the same as what our parents had. So maybe our life is, we can live longer and healthier because we know about what we're putting in our body. We're doing the work to make ourselves physically more fit and in shape than our parents could.
Are millennials not looking better than ever?
Oh,
We are.
Which millennials are you looking at?
I mean, I think I feel better about myself than I have like anytime in my 20s. Like my metabolism's out the door, but like everything else, like I feel like I'm feeling better. Like I'm a little more achy when I work out and like sore, but I like being sore because it makes me feel like I was doing something. But I still feel really good. Mind you, I work in an industry where you have to look a certain way, and I still like struggle with that. But I think as millennials, like we're still looking pretty good.
Well, don't get me wrong. I love it when people think I'm 30 or 35 years old. Like, wow, like that's awesome. I'm doing something right here.
Yeah.
But it's a different mindset that I have than my parents just didn't have.
Yeah.
And I had to accept that so that I could say, how am I going to thrive in a place like the Bay Area because of the cost of living and everything here? My life will look different than my parents did. I've accepted that. And that's why I'm able to go forward with it. Now, nothing to say that if somebody does want to have a family and they want to buy a $1.5–2 million house here that looks like it's from the 1970s because you want to raise the family, I totally get that. I respect that. And as long as you're both on the same page about this is what our life will look like, we're both going to work and mom and dad are going to have to live in the house with us to take care of the kids, or your job is going to pay for the nanny because you want to keep your career. I totally get that. As long as you're on the same page, but if you don't have those conversations early, then when the kid comes like, so I just assume you're going to do this. Well, I assumed you're going to do that.
Right.
That's where it's going to have major problems.
Yeah.
But in an industry like what you're doing now, like you're so focused on your career, and I know you want to see it all the way through, you know, you probably already thought about this. What does my life look like now? What will it look like? And it probably won't be the way that my parents did. And I'm okay with it because this is what I want. And I want to follow my passion all the way through. So I think that's a great thing that you're already thinking about now.
Totally. And like I've adjusted to it. Like I've adjusted to the hours. I've adjusted to the social aspect, and my friends have too. My family has too. I think just recently, like the last year, my family has really embraced, like, we're not going to talk to her until really November. And like when stuff happens, I will, like, if it's important, like we had a death in the family. My Uncle Michael passed away. He was this beautiful human. I made sure I made time to be with my family. Like those things I'll make time for. But they also know that like working is not only my passion, but it's how I deal with stuff. I'm so much better at handling things if I could just be alone and work. As much as I love like being on camera and doing the microphone stuff, prepping for a show is like my sense of togetherness. I'm cool when I can just prep for something, and I like it. Like yesterday, all I did was prep. I prepped, I worked out, and I prepped some more, had an iced coffee. And I remember thinking, like, this is the life you prayed for and dreamed of, like to get ready for a cool podcast in a day full of tapings. And I didn't complain once about it. I complained a little bit to Piper. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't complain to her, mainly because I have a wedding I have to go to. I'm like, I have to do spray tan, I have to do all this stuff. But then I was like, why am I bitching? Like, I have to go cover this team, a really fun series in town. I get to be a guest on a great podcast, and I have to go spray tan and watch one of my closest friends growing up fall in love with the love of her life. Like that's like a really good week. And just stuff like that, you know, it's like you breaking it down to make it so I prayed to be busy and now I'm busy and now I'm complaining about it. No, absolutely not. So just one of those things. So I've adjusted to all of that. And even because for her, she had a bachelorette party or a bridal shower, and last minute I couldn't go. And she was so cool with it. She's like, yeah, I mean, kind of work happens, like what have you. Mind you, she's an A's fan, so she's like, I would never argue with like an A's situation, so that helped. But they totally understand, and you have to have people in your life that accept that as well.
Exactly. And finding out the ways that work for you to help you
Totally.
get through that. Like you said, you're big into therapy, and I'm guessing that is helping you out, correct?
Absolutely.
Great.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And not even that, like I had Cassidy Hubbarth on the show and she said, and I talked to Jenny Kavnar about this, you have to 100% show up as yourself. Mind you, I don't have a husband. I don't have kids. I don't know what it's like to have that aspect of my life. So like I said, I don't want to be naive to it. And I never will until I'm going through it. But I think in order to understand, like my friends and my family know that I have to 100% show up as the broadcaster, as the reporter, as the host, I can't do that and only be 50% there and 50% here. So when I'm there, I'm 100% there. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Like something will break, an agent will text me, I have to do something, and I let that go. But that's a very minute part of being all together and be present. So they know if I'm 100% with them, they know I've 100% put everything else from the work aspect on the back burner for now. And same thing, if I'm not answering you for 2 hours, it's because I have to 100% be at this job right now. And I can't be successful doing both at the same time. It's very difficult. But if you want me to be the best niece or aunt, whatever, I can do that. But you have to understand for 2 hours, I cannot do that 100%. So it's a balance aspect. And balance doesn't mean doing necessarily everything at the same time. It's showing up 100% in different times.
What is the best thing that you enjoy about your therapist? And then how do you even
Oh,
find a good
she's
therapist?
amazing. That's a great question. I got very lucky with her. I researched her during COVID, where everybody was having mental health struggles, and I reached out to her, and I reached out to like 5 or 6 people, and she was the only one to respond. And I went to her. This was like 5 or 6 years ago. And then I took a break from therapy because it got a little expensive, to be honest. And now that I'm making good money again, I went back to her. For me, I'm an overthinker. And my overthinking, it sounds so simple, but for me, my overthinking turned into everybody hates me. Nobody thinks I'm good at my job. I'm a terrible daughter. I'm a terrible sister. I'm a terrible this. I'm a terrible that. And then my mom just passed away a year ago. So that was something I was dealing with as well. And it wasn't just the passing of her that was part of it. It was our relationship that we had. And my dad died when I was 19. So my mom had to be the co-parent, two parents, and it was a whole thing. And I was the only, I have this crazy career and it's public and it's all this other stuff. So for her, it was just telling me a lot of the shitty things that happened to me weren't my fault. And there was a lot of shit that happened to me. Not just death. It's like I had in 2023, it was 3 deaths, including my mother, and she died of cancer. So I had to take care of her. I was taking care of her every time the A's would go on the road. I would go back to Reno and take care of her. And she was very stubborn. So she only wanted me and my little brother to help her. And cancer's a disgusting thing. And watching somebody you love go through it is terrible. And then 2 other people passed away. I was going through a breakup. There was a lot of stuff going on with work. It was just nonstop. So as time went on, I remember thinking like, this is a lot. This is a lot. My friends can only do so much. So just having a third party to kind of vent to talk about, it was great to know that she not only validated me and my feelings, but said all these things that have happened to you, this wasn't your doing. These things happen. It's not your fault. So that alone was a breakthrough. But now I'm on the healing journey, and I didn't realize that healing means you have a breakthrough and then you're cured. And that's not the case, because when I had my breakthrough a month later, I had a really tough day. And it's one of those things that reminds me we're human. So life is going to throw shit at you, and life is neither good nor bad. It's life. You can feel invincible, and then the world will come crashing down within the next 7 seconds. So it's about finding my balance and grounding myself, because I have a tendency to be overconfident and over insecure, and they battle each other a lot. And it's about finding an even ground where I can show up as myself and be true to who I am, because at the end of the day, if I go to bed and I showed up as myself, I'm doing the best I can. And I think having her definitely balanced out everything. And weirdly enough, just having her remind me that nothing was my fault that happened to me changed my life, because I'm very independent. And when my dad died, I felt like a piece of me died. And then as time went on and I did this job on my own, I had people supporting me, but I moved out to the Bay Area on my own and started this crazy dream on my own. And to know that I have to, if I did all of that on my own, but I like beat myself up internally, that's like counterintuitive. So if I have to show up for myself and make sure that the inner child's healthy and happy and she's tended to, then it's good. So just like the moment that happened, I woke up and I went to work and like I was so magnetizing. Like people, I felt love, like real love that I deserved, and not even the romantic sense, but the people that I've been, you know, spending my days with, my friends, my family, my colleagues, all of that. My life absolutely changed, and it's a huge investment, but the best investment I've ever made. And I would not be where I am without her.
Well, that is a great story to hear, and I'm glad that you found someone that you can relate to, and you know
And
that
it's
she'll
hard.
always be there for you.
It's tough too. It's like finding a job. It's like finding a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It's like dating. It's tough to find the right therapist. I just got very, very lucky.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
And it speaks to where the power of that therapy does help so many people, because
Yeah.
you can get that stuff out there. I'll tell you from my side of it, and this is, and people, well, certain people don't like it when I say this, but I say, you know what, all that part is good. That does not work for me to help me get through some of the more
And
difficult
that's okay.
things. And I like that, because for me, like, especially in my job, we'll see very traumatic things. Like one time there were, you know, those tall transmission lines for PG&E, the big steel
Yeah.
towers, whatever. There was one of them that was sitting in somebody's backyard, and then this guy, unknown guy, just decides to climb it. He suffered a mental health crisis.
Yeah.
Get there. We're trying to talk him down, call the fire department, let's get the ladder, whatever. Tell him stay where you're at. And then in his mind, whatever I said got him to do something else. He decided to go on the line. So the second that he touched the line, you can imagine what happened
Yeah.
there. About 200 feet down into somebody's backyard, and I'm the first one there, and I'm like, okay, I'm running to the fence. I have no idea what I'm going to see. Is this part here? Is this part here? Like the
Yeah.
whole thing. What am I going to see? I get over it, and there was a tree there that he landed in, and it sort of slowed his fall. Got over it, realized he's alive, he's staring up at me. So I tell everybody, okay, he's alive. Get the medic, do whatever we got to do. There was a limb that didn't make it because the electricity had to escape somewhere. But the whole process of getting the tourniquet on and getting him with the fire department, getting them airlifted out, it was a lot to deal with. And then as soon as that helicopter leaves, you're back to going to the next call. You just have to process it and go with it. And then for me, you know, I didn't need, of course, they always asked, you know, do you need someone to talk to, whatever. And some people need it, and I totally get it, and I respect it. For me specifically, I have to get into the gym. Like, that's my happy place.
And I feel like it's no different than anything else. Like even with therapy, there was times where I wasn't ready for therapy, because I hate when you like go through a traumatic experience, and I quote traumatic experience because every traumatic experience is trauma. I don't care if, like I told you guys about NFL, he stopped playing NFL one day. Sometimes if a guy doesn't text me back, I will spiral. Don't ever tell anybody I said that. It's fine. Or, you know, but then I have to deal with like the death of my parents. Like that's traumatic too, but we shouldn't compare traumas. And you can't just deal with the trauma and then think I go to therapy and you're fixed. And because that's not fair either, because if you're not in the right mindset, I was stoked to go to therapy. I was excited. And even telling her again, because I took like a 3-year break, she got excited that I was excited. It's not a waste of her time. It's not a waste of mine. And she gets giddy seeing me progress. And that's great too. And same thing, there's times where I think therapy isn't the right time for me during the day. Same thing, I have to go on my hot girl walk and that'll help. Or I have to go work, or I have to do whatever. Like sometimes I just need a glass of wine, I need a bubble bath. And self-care doesn't always have to be a glass of wine and a piece of chocolate cake and a bubble bath. Self-care can be journaling. It could be what have you. It could be going to the gym. Everybody's aspect is different, but we shouldn't judge people on the way that they cope, unless it's obviously hurting somebody. But
Yeah, and that's one thing that I think people are starting to figure out now, is that there are certain things that work great for some people, and there's certain things that work better for other people. But as long as you found what you're doing, you're not, I guess you could say, holding it in and just don't want to deal with it. You're finding a way to get it out of your system. Then that's the main thing, is that you're working that. And the reason why I bring that up is because we talked about it earlier. This mental health thing, since the pandemic specifically, it's just skyrocketed, where, you know, a lot of things are happening. People's lives are changed. How they, you know, I was talking to your intern here, and she was telling me her last 2 years in high school just lost because of the pandemic, and she had to readjust with all that. And that's a lot for people to deal with, and things that we didn't have to experience when we were younger. What's a pandemic? That's probably something you see in the movies. But to find ways to get through it now, and to know that there's not just one specific solution, like this is going to help everybody and you must do it because that's what's supposed to work. Like, no, this is going to help some people. And if you find a great therapist, then you nailed it. Then
Yeah.
you just keep running with it. And then for some other people, it's something else. And I know with you talking to players, they probably tell you, you know what, I have my happy place over here, or this is what I do to get through that game that I really screwed up on. And, you know, it's all me, but this is how I'm going to cope with it. And you find your way to deal with it. And that's something that I want people to understand, is that there are different ways that people can use to get through these traumatic times in whatever industry that you do. So I'm glad we brought that part up.
Yeah.
One thing I want to get to with this is, in this industry that you're doing, you're putting a lot of time. What would you say you work, 60, 80 hours a week, or it fluctuates depending on when the team is here?
I mean, I still work just as hard when they're on the road. But yeah, I'd say 60 hours a week.
60 hours a week.
Yeah.
Is this something that you would, if somebody wanted to come to you and say, you know, Jessica, I'm thinking about doing what you're doing and I'm ready to put the work in, like right there, here?
Piper.
Exactly.
It's a great question.
At some point, the conversation is going to come up about money. Like, hey, can I make it with this career? You know, is it like six figures right away as soon that you sign up for it? How would you best frame answering that without specifically saying, here's how much I make?
I say the same thing. You're either making $2 or $200,000. There's no in between. It's when I first got started, I was getting paid $200 a month. Mind you, I had a different job, so it was whatever. It was $200 a month to write 12 articles a day. They were short articles, and plus, if you take a step back, and it was $200 on top of my full-time job, it was pretty good gig. But that was when my one bedroom, one bath cost $600 a month.
Those
Back
are
in
the
the
days.
day. Oh man, beautiful. So it's one of those things. But I also know it's so unique because I say I work 60 hours a week, but half of the time it doesn't feel like work, and maybe even more than that. And I'm lucky with that aspect. And I know when I struggle with my overthinking and I'm ruminating or dealing with limerence, what have you, the moment I get to the yard, that goes away. So it's therapeutic in that regard. And talking to people is therapy for me too. So those things, the perks certainly in that aspect outweighs it, but you also pay in time. I don't go to a lot of my nephew's baseball games, and that fucking sucks. I miss a lot of bridal showers and birthdays. And the other day I saw a group of my college, or I guess we all worked together at a retail store, and they all had like a trip, and they didn't invite me because they figured I'd be busy with baseball. And I wasn't busy for a little bit, and I probably could have made the trip, but the fact that they didn't ask me because of a scheduling situation that like hurt my feels a little bit. So that aspect certainly sucks. And yeah, so you have to remind yourself of that aspect as well. But I also know that I can't imagine doing anything else. The people I've met, because you work together so closely, they become your family, which is a great aspect, especially to me, because I'm away from my nephew and my brother that live in Reno, so I don't see them as often. But it's definitely one of those things that I think about because I have my family there. And there's certainly those aspects. And I just love it. I'm comfortable on a baseball field. Monetarily, though, I think there are different things you want. If you want to make money, you should probably choose a different field.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Very short into the point. I
Yes,
like that.
yes.
So with that, how do you think about, okay, if I'm planning for my future, do I see myself retiring? What does that look like? Do you find ways to think about how you're putting money away? Excuse me. And I ask that because at our age group here, we never thought we would hit this point where
Yeah.
like, okay, hey, you know, we're almost getting ready to retirement age. We're like, that's just way too far away. Next thing you know, we're getting closer. And it's like, wait, geez, how does this whole thing work? Am I going to have to be working until I'm 75? How do you process
I
that?
don't
Or do
mind
you?
working until I'm 75. That's the issue, though. I'm going to be an old honorary beat reporter for an MLB team when I'm 75, and I'll retire when I retire. Money wise, yeah, I think I'm always worried about money because I think like not just living in the Bay, but like I make it on my own. I'm always stressed about like the saving and all of that aspect. I'm very open with retirement or working toward retirement, but I also don't stress over it because I do love the work that I do and I don't mind continuing it. I'm surrounded by people outside of this industry who are like, I cannot wait to retire because I don't like work. I don't like doing it. And I'm like, I get it. I totally get it. I wish I had the mentality where I was like looking forward to retirement but that's just not who I am. Like I love the work that I do. obviously the money is great, but the money eventually came with everything else. Like I loved what I did and the money followed. I know that sounds like a cliche. I know people say that, like, if you're passionate about something, do it and the money will follow. That's literally what happened with me, but that's not always the case. And it's fun and it's great. And I meet the most amazing people. Like I said, like I went from watching Dallas Braden throw a perfect game and now he's like a member of my family. So it's just one of those things that I never thought would happen. So those aspects are priceless. But I also know that I do the best I can to like put towards retirement. Like I have a high yield savings account. I keep track of that, and I have 401k with the stuff that I'm dealing with. So I pay attention to those things. I just try not to stress about it because money always stresses me out. So I just do my best to like know that it's there. I'll take care of it when I take care of it. But I also know that I like my career and I don't mind working for a long time.
Well, the point is, you're not getting any sort of FOMO about I'm at this age, I should have had a house already,
No,
or
oh
the
my
fact
gosh,
that I'm
no.
comparing
I
myself.
had FOMO about like my life about 3 years ago because my mother always wanted me to have like kids and get married. And now, but she has kids and she had grandkids, and that she had a son who has a wife. So I was just always kind of confused by that. And she's just old school, which is like, I guess she's not really old school though, 'cause she worked for the federal government for 45 years, but she also like loved being a mom and loved being a grandma and loved being a wife. But it was one of those things that I think she didn't understand the job that I had. She knew what I was doing, but she didn't see like all the behind the scenes stuff that I put into the career. So for me, it was not like the main goal until about 3 years ago when the umpteenth one of my friends was having a baby and the umpteenth one of my friends was getting married. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I think at the time I had a boyfriend and we were certainly talking about that. But I also, his mentality was I'd rather get married than like have this prestigious career. And mine was like, I'd rather have this prestigious career than get married. And maybe that was because it was who he was. But
But he'd rather get married, or he'd rather you get married than have a prestigious career.
he would rather us get married than me continue my career.
Okay.
So that's a huge red flag there. He wanted me to like give up everything and move to Reno and cover high school sports. That's what he wanted me to do. That was not going to happen.
Okay.
So that was kind of a thing there. But
You know, going back to your mom there, I think what she was doing, and I understand this from a different generation, is that what she did made her happy and fulfilled. She had the family, and this worked. So it comes from a good place. Like this
She
is
wanted
what
that
made
for me.
exactly, because
Yeah.
she knows that would make, if that made her happy, that has to make you happy. But then from a different generation point of view, it's, we get why that made you happy, but the times have changed, dynamics have changed, the world has changed, and just because that may make you happy doesn't mean that the career and the things you do now won't make you just as happy, if not more happy,
Totally.
more
And
fulfilled.
I think she knew my career came easy for me when I mean, getting there wasn't easy, but now like I can do a pregame show in my sleep. But at the time she was like, all right, well, what about like a boyfriend? And I was like, I don't know. Like, it's just, and I used to date like as a numbers game, and I'm not doing that. It's more intentional now. So I can understand where she was coming from, because I'd have a new dating story for her all the time. And now I don't, but it's one of those things. So I can see why she would do that, because I was dating. And now that I'm, I mean, obviously she's gone, but now I never brought it up. So
Well, with that, what has been your biggest frustration with the dating scene now, whether it's specifically the environment or the men or what we do or what you don't, whatever it is?
well, I don't really date in the Bay. The last date I went on, like I flew on the date, like to meet him on the date. Which is because I did the Bay Area thing. So I feel like my frustrations were the love bombing, and like the intention was too intense. I guess that's kind of redundant. It was too intense at the beginning, and we didn't have like a friendship on the foundation. And I was at fault for that too, because for me, when I was so busy, it would just be like, are we doing this or not? Which sounds cool because I've got like a timing thing, but you can still go slow and be intentional at the same time. And I think that's important too. So I think that's where my frustrations lie. I told you like the fangirling. I hated that. I'm not a fan of like, oh, you met Buster Posey. What was he like? And just all that stuff is annoying. And I think nowadays, like we're just overwhelmed with so much on these dating apps. And I haven't been on the dating apps. I think I deleted them, like I said, right before the season started. So it's been a couple months. And, but if you start a conversation with somebody, it's not really a conversation. It's like you're talking to this Avi with the photo and you're saying certain things. And so you're not really getting a good read on who this person is. And when you do start a conversation, if it goes somewhere, you're like, I'm over it. Let me just talk to this other person that like I saw, what have you. So that's certainly part of it too. I think we're, especially because I'm in my 30s, so I've done the quick dating thing. I've been in serious relationships. It's kind of hard to find the happy medium of somebody who's taking me seriously, somebody who wants to connect with me on an emotionally deep level without wasting my time or getting too quick. We don't want to get too short to the point, right? So it's one of those aspects. I want an old school fun love. And I think that does not exist anymore.
I wouldn't say it doesn't exist, but I would tell you that because you're so clear in what you want and what you know you don't want, or what you've accepted, like the whole kid thing, like you've accepted this is my career, I'm following this. Because you made that decision, it makes it a little bit easier because you're not worried about the clock saying, okay, I have to hit this by a certain time. I'm 2 years behind being married. You'll do right there because you're available. You can go focus on your career. It can happen more organically.
I am nervous about the taxi cab theory though.
Which is what?
You've never heard the taxi cab?
Tell me.
Have you heard the taxi? Okay, it's on Sex in the City, and
that's why I've heard of it.
It's mainly geared toward men, where women are always kind of ready to settle down. But a man isn't until the light goes on. Because when you're in a taxi cab, if the light's on, they can pick you up. So when the taxi's going, the light's on, they'll pick you up when they're ready, when the man is ready. I'm worried I'm going through that phase in my life where because I'm ready, then I'm just going to be with the first guy that I see that I'm willing because I'm ready.
But what does ready mean? Does ready mean get married and have a family? Or does ready mean I'm ready to have that relationship again and then we'll see where it goes? There's no pressure to have to hit this time frame.
I don't think my next because my previous relationship was to let's get married and have kids when the timing's right, and I don't think that's value, or I'm open to it, but I don't want to go, like, I'm down for whatever. If I meet the person and he's like, I don't want to get married, I want to be a partner, maybe we'll have a kid, like, I'm open to those things. But I think we also live in a society where we can embrace all those different things. If I eventually get married, it's not like I'm saying no to it. If I eventually want to have kids and not get married, I'm not saying no to it. If we get married and don't have kids, I'm open to it. Partner forever, I'm open to it. But I definitely see myself with somebody in the future. But I'm worried that I'm on the mentality where I'm exhausted by it, where if like my taxi cab is lit up, the first guy that talks to me, I'm like, you'll do. But it's weird. I don't have that mentality. I really don't. But I also know that like how exhausting dating is. I can see myself just being like, all right, let's do this.
It's just
which sucks that I have that mentality.
I believe it.
Yeah.
There's some of the network of guys that I have that are still single. They're like in their mid to late 30s. There's one guy specifically that he lives here now, but he grew up in the East Coast and he's worked all over the country, Seattle, whatever. Yeah. And he says he likes San Francisco. And one day I asked him, hey, how's the dating scene been in all the other cities? And I expected him to say Miami is the place to go, or New York City. He's like, honestly, it's San Francisco, hands down, which threw me for a loop because
it's the best or the worst?
The best.
Really?
And I was like, okay, you're the first person that's ever told me that dating is easier in San Francisco.
I'm completely the opposite. It's always been terrible for me.
So, well, let me tell you why he said that. He manages several like startup companies and whatever. So he does that for them. And he's like, I'm so busy with my job that I actually appreciate it when there's a woman that has her career and she's doing her thing. Okay. So that I'm not always bummed. Because there are days where, and especially like me doing this for my job, it's like, leave me alone. I have to finish this. So not having that pressure of like, hey, we're getting older. What's going on? Whatever I hear. He's like, I can't deal with that. And when that person understands me, time to be like, okay, I'm getting to know her a little bit more. And then the little things that really set you apart is when you pick up on the things that he likes and then you find a way to bring that in. Like a good example, basically I had said something about, I like this, whatever it was. Right. It was an example. I forgot what it was exactly, but that wasn't the point. The point was one day randomly she's going to work and she's passing by my place. Hey, are you home? Yeah, I'm home. I'm doing something. Okay, goes up. Hey, I brought you this. Like, what is that? Oh, you knew I like this. Trust me, you have to try this from this great bakery or whatever it was from nearby. I have to go. I gotta go to work. But I remembered you said you liked this. I'm like, nobody would. Your random like date person would never do that.
Yeah.
It sets you apart that you heard that I said something way back when. You know I'm busy, and you go sort of out of your way
Yeah.
to just drop something out, and there's no expectation of now that I'm here, what are we gonna do? It's here you go, enjoy it. I have to go to work and do my thing. It's like that builds up over
That's
time.
true.
So those little things that people do, and I'm sure if the reverse happened to you, if he did something for you that you
100%.
mentioned, and then he remembered that
Yeah.
something simple, and nobody else did that, it's like there's something.
You know, my producers do that. My producers will remember something like, I want this song, and 2 weeks later it'll play on my intro. I'm like, those they do exist, right? And I don't want to, like, I love men. I don't want to come off as like anti-men. I think it's so important for me to say that because I don't want to enter the era where I'm like, men suck. I'm like hardcore against men because that's not the case. But I definitely value myself more than I ever have. And I value relationships too. Like, I understand that a relationship is so important. Like, the partner you choose for the rest of your life is a big fucking deal. And I don't think people get that because we're in a situationship era too, or we're just like half-ass doing it. And I don't know how to half-ass something. Why would I do that with my career? And if I'm going to do that with my partner for the rest of our lives, like, how dare I? That's so against everything that I've ever taught myself. And I've done that. I've had just boyfriends to have them, and I'm never going to do that again.
Jesus. And I bet you the guy that you do find one day, he's probably gonna hate baseball. Like, oh good, I can't stand baseball.
Hear that, and it's interesting because like a lot of my friends will say that, like, you're probably gonna meet a guy who doesn't like baseball. But I definitely, the last guy I dated worked in sports, so I like the schedule aspect because he was never tired. He was never fangirly over it, so it certainly helped. But before that, I never dated anybody in the sports world, and he was, and that helped in that aspect. So I'm kind of torn with that.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But something will work out, and it's funny. It's probably gonna be when you don't expect it.
100%.
That's how it's gonna happen.
But I will say, like, I fucking hate when people tell me that, and I say that with love. It'll be when you least. Totally true, but it's also like, you haven't dated in 2024 or 2023 or 2022.
Glad I haven't, because
exactly.
it draw me nuts.
It freaking sucks.
Especially with social media now. Like,
Yes.
if I had Instagram when I was whatever in my 20s,
Yeah.
like, holy wow,
Yes.
this would be a whole different world.
Totally.
We had MySpace. Like, okay,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
nothing like
So
this.
it's a lot. It's a lot, and I don't think we know how we connect with the person's profile before we remember that they're a person. And mind you, people go on Instagram, and I joke all the time, like, Jessica Kleinschmidt on Instagram, she has her shit together. I wish I was her. I'm her maybe 60-70% of the time. Definitely not her all the time. So you're not going to be dating Instagram Jess. You're going to be dating the 30%. She's not always there, you know?
Well, that's all. But it's like, you want to see the real me, then okay,
Yeah.
look behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's sitting in front of a computer doing this. That's
Yeah.
work, but I enjoy it, and that's
Totally.
me. It's not always the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Well, talk to me a little bit about your podcast now. And what did you make? What caused you to make that shift where it's you wanted to expand beyond just baseball and get into the other aspects that you talk about there?
Honestly, people don't give a shit about baseball, and that's very true. And I know that because I cover, I guess, one of the worst teams in the league, and I'm very aware of that. And it's also very difficult to market the sport. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't prove, because when you post something online, it's basically a resume. You're putting your stuff out there to say, she can do this other work, she can do other jobs and stuff like that. So I wanted to show that I can cover more than just baseball. And I also feel like everybody has a story. And if I just stuck to the baseball way, I would get bored with myself. And the only way for me to show up 100% is to do all the things. So that's what so the beginning of it was tough. We didn't know where it was going. We didn't know if it was going to be like mainly sports media people, former athletes. And then we had one great breakthrough conversation after another. And then it was like, I think we have to go like in depth with sports figures. This is kind of how it happened. And the guests got bigger and bigger. I had Ricky Carmichael, which was a huge, you want to talk about fangirling? I was fangirling. I'm from Reno, where we love dirt bikes, and we got to interview him. Tim Kirchin came on recently, former players and stuff like that. So I think it's definitely doing really well. So for me, it was just showing about like how versatile I can be And I don't think there's anything like it. Everybody's very surface level. They're talking about like dating and all this other stuff, which is important, which is how you discovered me, of course, was having Sartain on. And he was wonderful. But it also showed that I can talk about that stuff as well. So I think it was that aspect, was showing that there was more to me than just talking about a baseball game. And I think people knew that, but I think they needed to see more of it and more on a more promising platform. And I wanted to have more of a demographic than just a man who likes to watch sports. I'm still a single girl who's learning about herself and figuring out what she wants out of life. And I feel like I wanted to introduce that aspect to it. And in order to do that, I still have to ask the questions, like the life questions, and then also the not so life questions. And sports is kind of a foundation of how I want to be raised, and raise my future family. But I also want to have an open dialogue and ask the tough questions, and not judge, because I feel like we're all going through shit. And that was kind of how it opened up. It blossomed into that. And it's been my little passion project ever since. So it's been really cool.
That's awesome. Is it just you, or you have a whole team that's doing all the editing, production,
I have a
getting guests?
producer who gets, he does the editing. He just now, I mainly got like most of the guests, but now that he's got a really strong soccer background, he's got a tennis background, he's got a wrestling background. So he's been amazing. Philip, you were a precious baby angel. He stepped up so much. And for me, my producer becomes my family. Like anybody who ever works with me, I want them to know that I genuinely care and love them, because we do have to talk about some scary stuff, some annoying stuff. And I've been put in scenarios that are tough. Like when I worked in a newsroom, I'd talk about deaths. I'd talk about Black Lives Matter. I'd talk about racial injustice. I'd talk about things that I was super uncomfortable with, but I had beautiful people that I worked with. Like Tony Kemp and Marcus Simeon taught me so much about being Black in 2022, whenever it was, 2021. I have no idea what that's like. How am I supposed to learn if I can't ask the questions? And they have to tell me the tough stuff that goes behind it. So I thought that was important too, because I know for me, I have a certain background where I honestly, I can't even relate to them in any sort of magnitude, but I think they appreciate knowing that I ask them those questions, and it can get emotional. And I think that's kind of where it starts. But yeah.
Wow. That is great to hear.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see the future of Shorten to the point, and
too.
see what that blossoms into. Because it's funny how it starts there, and then where does this go from
I
here?
really think it's going to be big. I'm not kidding. Like, I think I just have this feeling that, and I even just the guest this morning, I manifested him onto the show. I was like, Jeff Schwartz is going to be a guest on my show. And I remember I talked to my producer. I was like, can we get Jeff Schwartz? He's like, yeah, I'll DM him right now. And Jeff and I have known each other for years, because he's actually a baseball fan despite having an 8-year NFL career playing for Eli Manning. Not a big deal. And so we got to talk about that. And then we talk about baseball. He's a big baseball nut. But I told him as we were starting, I was like, I manifested you as a guest today. And it just kind of, came up. Even Ricky Carmichael, I was like, I want to meet him one day. And then I ended up having him as a guest. And not only that, he sends an email to my producer saying, like, I appreciated Jessica being so prepared. It really resonated with Ricky. I knew he was like very a stickler to timing and everything. And to get a compliment from Ricky Carmichael, who my brother was obsessed with growing up, like, that makes him happy, and all this other stuff, and having a WWE superstar on, 2 of them actually. My brother loves that stuff too, so I want him to be involved and him to pay attention to my stuff, because he loves me, but he's like, okay, another baseball podcast, Jess, we get it. Oh, another broadcast, cool. So it's one of those things where I want to have more people involved, but I create, it becomes passionate for me because it's something that I don't know, and I leave learning something. And I feel like I said that to you before, but we're always growing. And even the NFL guest I had today, it's NFL where they're not making as many changes as like baseball is, but there's still so much to learn. And especially for a guy who had 8 years in the league and now he's in the media aspect, you think he knows it all, but he doesn't. So if I know that he's still learning about a sport that he was very well known in, to me, who I think I know baseball well, but there's always something new that comes out that I had no idea about. And I like being the person to ask the question about that, to open the minds of other people.
That is awesome. Jessica, this has been an exciting conversation. Yeah. As you can see, time flies when you're having a great conversation.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I'll ask you one final thing, and that is if there's any advice you can give to millennial, maybe even Gen Z women about getting into a career like this, expectations over hours, over money, over the work you have to put in, and maybe the perception might be, what would be some big tips you could give them?
Actually, Piper, I should ask you, because when I hired her, didn't I ask you what you thought? Now that you've been kind of put to work and you've been amazing, she's been amazing, by the way. What have your perceptions been, and have they lived up to those expectations?
There's like, it's just your life. Like, it's not, there's no hours. It's like, there's no hours. Like, I was in Texas at the time, and I did something for you at like Friday night.
Yeah.
And, like, it was like midnight my time, and I was like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I got it. Like, it took me 2 hours, but then the next day I did something and it took me 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And then, like, I know whatever I'm doing, you're doing 27 times as much, but like, I love what I'm doing, and I know that you love what you're doing. So it's like, when you find people that love the same thing, it's so much easier to like do that, because you have people who love what they're doing together.
Yeah.
And I think that's my biggest thing, is like, I really truly enjoy what I'm doing.
Yeah. And so just kind of like what I said, like, we don't have the hours there, but like, I think that that's an aspect of it too. So when I'm giving out advice, I'm very honest. Like I mentioned the timing that's involved, and that's true, but you really have a come to Jesus moment. Like, do I want to do this? And I feel like that's not just the reason why I brought her on, because I know she just works her ass off, but I also wanted her to see the behind the scenes stuff, and she's gotten, glimpses of it, and it's, you'll see more of it as time goes on. But she's right. Like, if I'm before bed, I'll think of something and I'm like, hey, can you help me with this at like 9:00 at night? And she has such a good, attitude about it. So that's like part of it is knowing that, like, before bed, I was prepping for my podcast this morning. I was in bed, all my face care routine, Sopranos is on the background, so I'm kind of getting into that, but also like prepping. And I would not do that at 9:00 to 10:00 at night if I didn't absolutely love this. But she also knows, like, I was like, thanks to your help, I was able to have like a dinner date with my girlfriend, like one of those things, so, but also like, you have to make time for those things as well. So that's part of it. But you're going to have to grind in the beginning. It's no different than a baseball player grinding through the minors and then he gets his shot. That's what it is. And when you get that shot, it's how you use that opportunity. And I still feel like I'm so lucky, the people that I work with, that they give me so much creative freedom. And I produced that Father's Day piece yesterday. I had the 2 broadcasters on. I had their kids do a message for them before the broadcast, and got them to cry on radio, which always, I love making men cry.
They're like, thanks, Jess.
Yeah, so it was really cool from that perspective. And it was just fun to produce, because I grew up a producer, and you can still utilize that. And that's a part of it too. Like, even if Piper doesn't end up working in sports media, but she learns something from this because of X, Y, and Z, that's important too. I'm going to try to teach her stuff that if you don't end up working in sports, that's fine. But I want you to learn something from it. I think she's going to, but there's nothing that she's not going to learn from me that won't help her in the future. And I learned that from, being in the newsroom and writing 1 billion articles and writing about random stuff. When you work for NBC, it's got to be newsy. I took a lot away from that. I use the news stuff in my reporting, and I still report. I still know the certain verbiage you have to use. Be a sponge. Soak up every little thing you possibly can. Meet people. Have conversations with people. That's how she reached out. She just sent me an email, and I was like, okay, let's talk. And that's huge too. And, learn from people. Everybody has a story, and you just really have to like create content. I know that sounds cheesy, but even if nobody's watching and nobody's listening to it and nobody's reading it, continue to put it out, because at the end of the day, we're all like kind of content creators, which sounds so cheesy, but I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years, and people used to talk shit about all the content that I made. And now they're like, hey, so like, how do you do that? I'm curious about that. Former players I used to cover are now coming to me for asking for help for like the broadcasts that they're doing now. And that like blows my mind. So it's just stuff like that, and that's because I was always approachable with them. So reverse it, you never know who you're going to meet and who you're going to come across. So just those types of things. And really, you have to believe in yourself, and little Delulu goes a long way. When I told my dad I was going to be the A's reporter, and now I'm doing it, that wasn't a coincidence. I knew I was going to do it. So. And
then this is not a 9-to-5er. This is not, you have a set schedule. You can plan your life around it. Sometimes you're going to have.
When you go to bed at night and you had like a damn good day at work, it's a different, beautiful kind of tired. I'm like all cuddled on my pillows, and like I can reflect, and that's better than a tired of being like emotionally drained. It's just different and it's good. And there's just no comparison because like she said, it's my life. And so you get to leave a good day of work, nailing work and then nailing life all at the same time.
And then how do you just deal with other people when they tell you you should be here, or why are you doing that? Why can't you come to this event? Why can't you do that? And just being able to process that and to say, I love my friends, my family, whatever, but this is what I have to do now and I got to take care of it, and being comfortable with that a decision.
I mean, I don't care. Like if they're like the loves of my life and they know me, they knew how hard I worked. They know especially if they work in the industry, they totally understand. Like one of my best friends is getting married and she's getting married in November because she's the Orioles play-by-play voice. Like she knows that aspect. But when it comes to the other aspects of the people that may be more casual, like they don't know like how, plus I don't really have any acquaintances anymore that I hang out with on the regular. So if they have a question with my schedule, they're not important in my life to like worry about. The people who matter, and I said this, the people who matter understand, but I also have amazing people that I work with. Like I have a wedding to go to and everybody at work was like, we'll cover you. Like it's going to be fine. And like my mom passed away last year, I took a couple weeks off. There was no question about it. They're like, whatever you need, or just like things happen and they take care of me. So it's also about having confidence in enough to tell them I can't make it. I've got work. That's having boundaries. And the people who react a certain way, like, okay, well, they showed you that's a strike one, strike two, strike three. They don't need to be in your life. So that's one of those things too. So just stay true to who you are and know that it's your schedule. It's what if they bring something extra to it, great. If not, like that's fine too. I have a billion other friends who will drop what they're doing for me and I can still show up when I need to show up. Just sometimes it might be a little bit late because I have to finish the game.
That is excellent to hear. I'm so glad that you said that because I think the audience is really going to benefit from hearing that message, considering what you've done and the work that you put into your career, and that this is the choices that you made in your life, and look where it's taking you.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see where the future of this podcast is going. But Jessica, thank you so much for coming on. This was a great conversation. I'm glad we were able to make this whole thing happen.
Me too.
Where's the best place that people could find you at?
On Twitter, it's still Twitter. It's not X. Get over yourself. It's at Kleinschmidt JD. On Instagram, Jessica Kleinschmidt. TikTok, I'm working on. Piper's been amazing and helped me with that too. It's at Jess Kleinschmidt on TikTok. And
the podcast, that's not, you don't have your own YouTube channel. It's awful.
It's through Awful Announcing.
Okay.
Yeah, but just search Shortened to the Point. But I post everything on my social media. I think I have a Shortened to the Point Instagram. We're trying to get that up and running, but that's starting an Instagram account stresses me out. But yeah, and then make sure you're following Awful Announcing too. They have a really, really good avenue, and I'm so thankful for them. Ben Koo, who owns it, gave me an amazing opportunity to start this. I literally had him on the phone. I was like, I've always wanted to like have a really good, like a good talk show. He's like, okay, let's make that happen. And so he's doing that for me, and it's been awesome.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks.
Great episode. Everybody, if you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it to anybody that you know that you believe will get a good message from this episode. That's how the podcast grows. That's how the channel expands. If you want to hear more about Jessica, she gave you all the links to follow her. And please check out Shortened to the Point. Thank you again, Jessica. Everybody have a good day.